Number 1. Murdo gay sok. Gara chirui va ko noi hirn kar hu for I am lung. I was standing barefoot in my driveway at 6:14 in the morning, watching my father's garage collapse into blackened beams and smoking metal, when Linda Marlowe walked up behind the yellow fire tape and said, "Well, I guess the neighborhood finally looks safer." The old cedar doors my dad had built by hand were gone. The roof had folded inward. His vintage pickup sat under steam and ash, nothing but a burned shell. Across the street, half the HOA board stood in robes and slippers, pretending to be horrified. Linda did not pretend well. She was the president of the Brookhaven Pines HOA, the woman who had spent 6 months fining me for that garage, calling it an eyesore, a safety concern, and a threat to community standards. 10 days earlier, at a public meeting, she had pointed her pen at me and said, "Some homeowners only learn when consequences become unavoidable." Now my garage was ashes, and she looked almost satisfied. Then the fire marshal stepped out from behind the wreckage, holding an evidence marker in one gloved hand. He looked at the burn pattern near the side door, then at me. "Your Honor," he said, "would you like to walk me through the threats you received from the HOA?" The entire street went silent. Linda's face changed instantly. The smugness vanished. The color drained from her cheeks. Because Linda Marlowe had spent half a year bullying the quiet widower at the end of the cul-de-sac. She had no idea I was Judge Ethan Caldwell. I did not yell. I did not accuse her. I simply looked at the fire marshal and said, "Start with the camera footage from 2:13 this morning." Linda thought the fire had destroyed my proof. She was about to learn it had only lit up everything she tried to hide. Number 2. Boy Karn Yun Vut. Nguy Therm Fanchir Morn Songian Trong Kunya Krachamin. Before Linda Marlowe decided my garage was a threat to civilization, I was just trying to get through the quietest year of my life. My name is Ethan Caldwell. I was 53 years old, widowed, and tired in a way sleep never really fixed. For almost 20 years, I had worked inside courtrooms where every word mattered, every document carried weight, and every person who walked in was either trying to be heard or trying to escape the truth. So, when I moved back into my father's old house in Brookhaven Pines, I promised myself one thing: no drama. The house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, shaded by 2 old maples and a row of boxwoods my mother had planted before I was born. It was not the biggest house in the neighborhood. It was not the newest. But to me, it was the last place on earth that still sounded like family. The garage sat behind the house, slightly detached, with cedar doors my father had built by hand in the late 80s. When I was a boy, that garage smelled like sawdust, motor oil, black coffee, and winter rain. My father taught me how to change a tire in there. He taught me that a man's property was not just dirt and walls. It was the place where his work, his memories, and his dignity lived. After he died, I found his old pickup still parked inside, covered in a canvas tarp. There were coffee cans full of screws on the shelves, a cracked radio on the workbench, and his handwriting on masking tape labels across every drawer. That was why Linda's first violation notice hit harder than it should have. It arrived on thick HOA letterhead with the words, "Architectural Noncompliance," in bold at the top. According to Linda, my garage was inconsistent with the current aesthetic direction of Brookhaven Pines. She demanded that I repaint it, replace the doors, remove the old exterior light, and submit a complete improvement application within 7 days. I sent a polite email back with copies of the original permit, the county inspection record, and the property survey. I explained that the garage was a grandfathered structure. I thought that would end it. That was my first mistake. Linda Marlowe did not want clarification. She wanted obedience. She was the kind of HOA president who treated a clipboard like a badge and a violation notice like a weapon. She walked the neighborhood every Saturday morning taking photos of trash cans, garden flags, mailbox paint, and cars parked 2 inches too close to the curb. At first, I tried to give her grace. Every neighborhood has one person who needs control more than community. But Linda saw my quietness as weakness. So, if you have ever dealt with an HOA, a neighbor, or anyone who uses fake authority to push people around, pay close attention. The first warning sign is not always the fine. Sometimes it is the smile they give you when they realize you are too polite to fight back. Linda thought I was that kind of man. She was wrong. Number 3. Suko Chin Hoa Biern Gara Hup Fap Thin, Moing E Hirm, Ziar Tao. Linda did not come after the garage all at once. At first, it was one letter, then another. then a fine. Then a second fine, doubled because I had failed to demonstrate cooperation. Every notice looked official, with the Brookhaven Pines logo at the top and Linda's name typed at the bottom like a court order. But none of it was backed by anything real. The second violation notice claimed my garage created a visual nuisance. The third claimed it had potential structural concerns. The fourth demanded a full demolition plan within 10 days. I read every line carefully, not emotionally. Carefully. There was no inspection report, no county citation, no structural engineer, no vote from the architectural committee, no legal basis for forcing me to demolish a permitted, grandfathered structure on my own property. So I kept replying politely. I attached the county permit, the final inspection record, and the survey showing the garage clearly inside my lot lines. I asked Linda to identify the exact HOA covenant she was relying on. She never did. Instead, she escalated. One Saturday morning, I looked out my kitchen window and saw two men in work boots standing beside my garage with measuring tape. One was writing on a clipboard. The other was taking pictures of the side door, the roof line, and the old exterior light. I walked outside and asked what they were doing. The taller one said, "We're here for the HOA." I said, "You're standing on private property." He shrugged. Mrs. Marlowe said the board authorized an assessment. Then Linda appeared on the sidewalk in white sneakers, sunglasses, and a satisfied smile. "Ethan," she said loudly, "this would be much easier if you stopped being difficult." I told her again that no one had permission to enter my property. She smiled at the workers. "Take everything you need. We may have to move forward without his cooperation." I stepped between them and the garage door. Quietly, I said, "Leave my property." The workers left. Linda did not. She stood at the edge of my driveway and said, "You know, people like you always think paperwork will save them." I looked at her and said, "Usually, it does." Her smile disappeared. 3 nights later, I received a letter from the HOA's attorney. It accused me of creating a hazardous condition, refusing lawful compliance, and damaging neighboring home values. It threatened daily fines, a lien against my property, and corrective action at the owner's expense. Corrective action. That phrase mattered. At the next HOA meeting, Linda made the entire thing public. She stood at the front of the clubhouse and called my garage a continuing threat to neighborhood safety. I stood up and asked, "Can you show me the written authority that allows the HOA to enter my land and remove a county-permitted structure?" The room went quiet. Linda laughed. "You clearly don't understand how an HOA works," she said. I nodded once. Then, "Explain it." She did not. Instead, she pointed her pen at me and said, "You have 10 days. After that, the board will pursue stronger remedies." On the 9th night, around 2:10 in the morning, my motion light clicked on behind the house. I glanced toward the window, but by the time I stood up, the yard was dark again. I thought it was a raccoon. At 2:31, my smoke alarm screamed. By the time I reached the back door, orange light was crawling up the garage wall. And as I stood barefoot, calling 911 while my father's garage burned, one thought cut through the panic. Linda had warned me. She just never thought I was listening. Number 4. Nhân vật ching diu tra. To kong fanering bang tuk zun. To fanering bang bang churn. And the first thing Linda expected me to do was lose control. I could see it in the way she stood across the street that morning, wrapped in her expensive robe, whispering to the HOA treasurer while firefighters pulled apart what was left of my garage. She was waiting for me to point at her, to shout, to make one emotional accusation in front of witnesses, cameras, and first responders. I did not give her that gift. I had spent too many years watching angry people destroy good cases with bad reactions. So I stood behind the fire tape, breathed through the smoke, and preserved the record. When the fire marshal asked who had been threatening me, I did not say, "Linda did it." I said, "I have written notices, emails, meeting minutes, and camera footage that may be relevant." That sentence changed the tone immediately. The fire marshal marked the side door as the suspected origin point. That mattered because the electrical panel was on the opposite wall. If the fire had started from old wiring, the burn pattern should have told a different story. I said nothing out loud. I simply made a note in my phone. At 8:02 a.m., I called my insurance company. At 8:17, I requested a certified copy of the fire incident report. At 8:31, I emailed myself every HOA notice Linda had ever sent me. Then I downloaded my security footage before the system could overwrite anything. The cameras did not give me a perfect movie scene, but evidence does not have to be perfect. It only has to connect. At 2:11 a.m., the motion light clicked on. At 2:13, a white SUV rolled slowly past my house with its headlights off. At 2:15, a dark figure crossed the side yard near the garage. At 2:18, the same figure moved back toward the street. At 2:31, the first glow appeared low against the side door. I watched that clip 4 times without blinking. Then I backed it up twice. By noon, I had spoken with Mrs. Alvarez across the street. She told me she woke up around 2 a.m. because her dog was barking. She saw a white SUV stopped near my curb. She could not see the driver, but she remembered one detail: a silver HOA parking decal on the rear glass. Linda's SUV had that decal. Still, I did not call Linda. I did not confront her. I did not answer when she texted me. This is why the board had concerns about that unsafe structure. I screenshotted it. Then I saved it. Then I printed it. That was the part people like Linda never understand. They think silence means fear. Sometimes silence means the other person is building a file. Over the next 48 hours, I pulled the original county permit, the final inspection record from 1989, my deed, the subdivision plat map, the HOA bylaws, the architectural records, the meeting minutes, and every violation log tied to my property. The more I collected, the clearer the pattern became. Linda had never had real authority. She had pressure. She had intimidation. She had neighbors afraid of fines and liens, but she did not have the law. When the insurance investigator arrived, I handed him a folder. Not a speech. A folder. Inside were the notices, the attorney letter, the meeting transcript, the contractor photos, my replies, the permit, the survey, and a written timeline ending with the fire. At 2:31 a.m., he looked up and said, "You're very organized." I said, "Paperwork usually tells the truth before people do." That afternoon, the fire marshal called. Preliminary indicators suggested the fire was not electrical, and fire. He had found signs of an accelerant near the side door. The case was now being treated as suspicious. That was the moment the dispute stopped being an HOA argument. It became a criminal investigation, and Linda still kept digging. She posted in the neighborhood group chat, "This unfortunate incident proves why the board must act before safety issues endanger the community." I saved that too, because Linda thought she was controlling the story. But every message, every threat, every smug little comment was not protecting her. It was writing the timeline for me. Number 5. Kulut Fapli Linda Hongchir Dot Gara, Bata Kon Dot Luan Lanoi Doi Kermin. The legal turn did not come from one dramatic confession. It came from 3 quiet facts Linda Marlowe had been too arrogant to notice. The first was the SUV. The second was the property map. The third was the sentence she had written in an email when she thought no one outside the board would ever read it. The SUV footage took 2 days to clean up. My front camera had caught it from an angle, blurred by rain and porch light glare. But the sheriff's office pulled footage from the small entrance camera at Brookhaven Pines. At 2:09 a.m., it caught Linda's white SUV entering the neighborhood. At 2:24 a.m., it caught the same SUV leaving. 15 minutes. Enough time to drive to my cul-de-sac, stop near my garage, and disappear before the first flames appeared. When a deputy asked Linda why her vehicle was near my property at that hour, she said she had been unable to sleep and decided to check on a possible safety hazard. That might have sounded reasonable if she had called 911. She had not. It might have sounded reasonable if she had stayed on the street. But my side camera showed a shadow crossing my yard near the garage door at 2:15. Then came the property map. My attorney compared my deed, the subdivision plat, the HOA declaration, and the amendment Linda had been using to justify her fines. That was when he found the problem. The Architectural Control Amendment only applied to structures visible from the main subdivision road and new exterior construction after 2001. My garage was built in 1989. It sat behind the house. And according to the original plat, that rear portion of my lot was outside the limited architectural easement granted to the HOA. Linda had not just overreached. She had invented power where none existed. Then my attorney sent a demand letter ordering the HOA to preserve every email, text, invoice, board vote, violation record, and contractor message related to my garage. One board member quietly turned over emails. And in that batch was the sentence that changed everything. After I refused to demolish the garage, Linda had written, "If he won't remove it, maybe fate will do what the board can't." She probably thought it sounded clever. In a courtroom, it sounded like motive. The same email chain showed she had contacted a contractor connected to her husband before any board vote. It showed she had asked whether the garage could be declared unsafe without a county inspection. It showed she knew the county permit existed and chose to ignore it. That was the moment her fake authority collapsed. I had followed the rules. She had broken them. Now, the fire marshal had accelerant near the side door. The sheriff had her SUV at the entrance gate. My camera had a figure in my yard. The county records proved the garage was legal, and her own email gave them motive. Linda still thought this was about an HOA violation. It was not. It was about trespass, fraud, abuse of authority, evidence preservation, insurance exposure, and suspected arson tied to months of written threats. That evening, Linda called me. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice sounded smaller than I had ever heard it. "Ethan," she said, "we don't have to involve the county in all of this." I saved the voicemail because the county was already involved. And by the next morning, the sheriff and the fire marshal were walking into the HOA clubhouse with a records request Linda could not smile her way out of. Number 6. Ko Kwan Chuk Nung Vau Quok. Ki Sheriff Burke Vau. Linda Kong Kon Langui Kirm Swat Kun Fong. The HOA clubhouse had always been Linda Marlowe's stage. That was where she fined people. That was where she embarrassed people. But the morning the sheriff walked in with the fire marshal, Linda stopped performing. I sat in the back row with my attorney and a folder on my lap. The fire marshal informed the board that my garage fire was being treated as suspicious. Then, the deputy served the records request. Every email, every text, every contractor invoice, every security recording. Linda forced a smile. "This is an HOA matter." The deputy looked at her and said, "Not anymore." The room changed instantly. The insurance investigator asked about the contractor who had entered my property before the fire. Linda said the board had authorized a safety assessment. My attorney asked for the vote. There was no vote. He asked for the county inspection request. There was no request. He asked for written authority allowing anyone to enter my land. There was none. Then Mrs. Alvarez stood up and said she had seen Linda's white SUV near my house after 2 a.m. That broke something open. One neighbor stood. Then another. Fake violations, threats of liens, selective enforcement, contractors connected to Linda's family. Linda tried to call for order. No one listened. 2 weeks later, Linda walked into court, still trying to look like the victim. Then the bailiff called, "All rise." Linda lifted her head. And for one frozen second, she saw me enter through the judge's door. Not as the quiet homeowner she had mocked, but as Judge Ethan Caldwell. Her face went pale. I did not preside over the criminal case tied to my own property. That would have been improper, but that day, Linda finally understood. The law was bigger than her title, bigger than her clipboard, bigger than her fake fines. When the court ordered the HOA to preserve all records, suspend enforcement against my property, and cooperate with county investigators, Linda did not argue. There was no easy way out. Number 7. Ho Quar Vaket Thuk Linda Mut Chik Gay, Hoa. Kanto Lerlai Ranger Kermin. The first thing the HOA did was cancel every fine against my property. Not reduce them, cancel them. Then came the public apology. Linda Marlowe was no longer allowed to speak for the board, and 3 days after the court order, she resigned. The official reason was personal stress. Nobody believed that. By then, the county had confirmed everything my paperwork had shown from the beginning. My garage was legal. The HOA had no authority over that rear section of my property. The fines were invalid. The contractor had no right to enter my land. Linda's husband's contracting company lost every HOA contract. The insurance company pursued recovery for the fire damage. The sheriff's office continued the arson investigation, and the criminal case went to another judge, exactly the way it should have. Months later, the HOA paid my legal fees, reimbursed my insurance deductible, covered the loss on my father's pickup, and funded the cleanup and rebuild. Linda sold her house before the next board election. No apology. No dramatic goodbye. Just a moving truck at sunrise and a white SUV leaving Brookhaven Pines without the silver HOA decal on the back window. I rebuilt the garage on the same footprint. New cedar doors, new lights, and one blackened metal drawer pull from my father's old cabinet, saved on a shelf above the workbench. People asked if I felt satisfied. I did. Not because Linda was humiliated. Because the truth held. Because property lines still meant something. Because permits still meant something. Because a quiet homeowner with records, footage, and patience could stand against someone who thought a title gave her power. Linda thought I was dangerous because I was a judge. She was wrong. I was dangerous because I kept every email. So if an HOA, a neighbor, or a contractor ever tries to push past your boundaries, remember this. Do not win by becoming reckless. Win by becoming impossible to dismiss. Read the rules. Save the notices. Keep the footage. Get the survey. Call the county. And never let someone with a clipboard convince you that your rights disappear because they speak louder. If this story made you think of your own HOA nightmare, share your thoughts in the comments, like the video, share it with someone who needs the reminder, save it for later, and subscribe for more stories where the truth does not shout. It simply shows up with evidence.